My question is, could one word worth $1 million make Virginia's Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, soften his support for anti-woke policies? The word in question is equity. And according to Virginia Mercury's Nathaniel Klein, a new Virginia budget proposal would redirect the state diversity office funds to its cannabis business loan program. Okay, is that delayed applause there?
Yarrow all of a sudden decided to jump in. Wanted to hit the applause button, apparently.
So the word in question is equity. According to Virginia Mercury's Nathaniel Klein, a new Virginia budget proposal would redirect the state diversity office funds to its cannabis business loan program amid dispute over whether the word equity or opportunity is to be used going forward. Klein reported that after top Democrats and community leaders called for the firing of state diversity chief last spring over his DEI is dead comments, Jason Beck approved, the General Assembly included language in its budget to redirect funding from the Office of Diversity, Opportunity, and Inclusion to a loan program to help license cannabis sellers unless equity is put back into the state's diversity office title by this summer. In January 2022, Governor Glenn Youngkin renamed the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion through an executive order by replacing equity with opportunity, because petty is what Republicans do. Contrary to state code, a move met with swift pushback from Democratic leaders. The law is diversity, equity, and inclusion, Senator Mamie Locke said in an interview at the end of last year's session. The governor's press office did not respond to the Mercury's request for comment earlier this week. The governor introduced his budget proposal in December, which appropriated an estimated $2.6 million in funding over the next 2 years for the Diversity, Opportunity, and Inclusion Office, consolidated into the general fund for governor's office. If the governor instead accepts the General Assembly's proposal, the Democratic General Assembly's proposal, because remember, elections have consequences, and they're all Democrats now. A budget amendment carried by Senate Majority Leader Scott Surovell by July 1st. $3.6 million. They upped the ante by a cool $1 million. Over the next 2 years will be appropriated to the office, and its title would be restored to Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. If the governor fails to do so, the budget approved by the General Assembly would redirect the funds to the Virginia Cannabis Equity Business Loan Fund. According to state law, the fund will provide no and low interest loans to qualified licensed cannabis businesses and business owners to help promote business ownership and economic growth in communities that were disproportionately impacted by cannabis when it was prohibited in the state. The significance of the word equity in Virginia's DEI or DOI office is historically immense. Janice Underwood, who served as director of diversity initiatives at ODU, we call it ODU in Virginia, Old Dominion University, was appointed by Democratic Governor Ralph Northam in September 2019 as the state's first director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was the first position of its kind in the entire country. So in 2020, lawmakers passed legislation to codify the law into law the diversity, equity, and inclusion director position in the governor's cabinet. History was made. According to the state law, the DEI director is responsible for developing a plan to promote inclusive practices across state government and address systemic inequities in state government practices. The director must also implement feedback from state employees and other groups into equity policy. The position was part of the governor's response to racial inequity in Virginia, thrown into stark relief by the killing of George Floyd, a black man, by a white Minneapolis police officer. It was also related to the state's commemoration of the 400th anniversary of the first enslaved Africans coming to Virginia. The new position came months after controversy prompted by a photo that surfaced of Northam's 1984 Eastern Virginia Medical School yearbook picture depicting someone in blackface and another in KKK robes. Since the position's established, 3 people have been appointed as chief diversity officer. Following Underwood, it was Governor Youngkin in January 2022 appointed Angela Saylor as the role and changed the office title to Diversity, Opportunity, and Inclusion during the first month of his tenure. Saylor previously served as an executive at the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank. Martin Brown, who served as the commissioner of the Department of Social Services, succeeded Saylor in November 2022, also appointed by Youngkin. Some of Brown's notable actions included supporting legislation to permit the placement of historic signs identified in the Green Book and championing controversial changes to the state's history standards adopted by the Board of Education, a la Meatball Ron.
Yeah.
Just copying whatever Meatball Ron does, it sounds like. Perhaps most notably, Brown faced widespread criticism for his remarks during a speech at the Virginia Military Institute last April, where he said this: "Let's take a moment right now and kill that cow. DEI is dead. We're not going to bring that cow up anymore. It's dead. It was mandated by the General Assembly, but this governor has a different philosophy on civil discourse, civility, living the golden rule." Right? Am I right? You actually said this shit. So I miss Virginia. I really, really miss you. Last year, Democrats questioned whether the governor was following the law when he changed the name of the position. In a letter sent to Attorney General Jason Miyares, Senator Scott Servell and Delegate Don Scott wrote, "The official state website for this office likewise uses an incorrect name and refers to Mr. Brown as the Commonwealth of Virginia's Chief Diversity, Opportunity, and Inclusion Officer, noting that the DEI title mandated by the state did not appear on the state website, which is illegal." Mayor has responded that if the governor makes sure the state's laws relating to the DEI office are faithfully executed, he may include within his cabinet a chief diversity, opportunity, and inclusion officer who is charged with performing duties supplemental to those of the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's petty on both sides. So fast forwarding over here. So this whole equity in, on trial dispute is very interesting, both because it's not so different than the struggles that the cannabis industry's faced over the years in defining what social equity even means. Municipality to municipality, state to state, nobody can truly agree on what it means, right? So it's something that we've faced over years, defining social equity, and the fact money earmarked to support what Virginia defines in their own version of social equity in cannabis to be is what is at stake here, given Youngkin's response to the proposal. The public lynching of George Floyd forced American society into a moment of racial reckoning. In the incident's wake came a wave of economic support for Black and BIPOC businesses and business initiatives. Efforts to inject diversity, equity, and inclusion along supply chains of every American business seemed like it'd be the new norm. In the era of capitalists turning a blind eye to discriminatory practices in favor of whites in comparison to their counterparts of color would soon be a thing of the past. 4 years later, DEI has become the dirty acronym most hated by conservative capitalists, hell-bent on reversing the pendulum swing and bringing back the good old days where boys can be boys. However, $1 million is $1 million. Is Glenn Youngkin going to go for that bait? Or is he just going to veto this, right? So I think it's going to be the latter, but either way, this is very interesting to see if he's going to choose the money or doing the right thing by his people. I'm Rico Lamitte, the dopest dad on the street for High at 9 News. Let's talk about it. What y'all think?
Back to the days when boys could be boys?
Virginia. Virginia's for lovers,
What is that about? Go back to the days of racism and slavery.
I visibly winced hearing that. I don't know if anyone saw that, but when that comment came across, I was like,
Yeah, me too.
I mean,
this is Virginia.
Life was so much better back then.
Oh my God. So my senior year in high school, man, in my civics class, this is the year 2000, we go to the state General Assembly where they're voting on changing Martin Luther King Day to King Lee Jackson Day. Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee, two Confederate traitors, but they consider them heroes in Virginia. And it lost by 2 votes. It was silently pushed into law 2 years later when I was a sophomore in college. So this is Virginia.
I mean, Virginia is the northernmost state of the South.
Virginia was the capital of the South.
Isn't Virginia for lovers?
That's what I always thought it was for lovers.
Define
it's the
love.
northernmost state in the South. Mason-Dixon goes through Maryland. It was part of.
If you can define love, you can define equity, I guess. Right?
Yes, right.
I mean,
The Mason-Dixon line must have been on that bridge that just collapsed in Maryland.
Oh
my God.
Wait, that's
That bridge did not collapse. That was a domestic terrorism
Too
hit.
soon. Oh, that was
hit by
That was
a
domestic terrorism. There's no way he could not have missed that. That was totally intentionally done.
Jason's been listening to Andrew Tate conspiracies all morning.
Already.
No, I haven't. This is my own.
There's no way it was intentional.
100% it was
What do you
intentional.
guys think about this? About the
Early
story,
on.
Yeah, about
Not
the story,
intentional by the operator, by the pilot, right?
though.
No,
Simon,
that's
What do you
impossible.
think about the story? What are you thinking about?
What do you think about this
story?
Virginia,
Glenn Youngkin-
Simon?
You know, I mean, I don't have any faith for Virginia, Rico. I hate to say it like that, but I lost all faith. I lost all faith on the East Coast, you know, except for my homies in Maine holding it down, making that fire.
Keeping the main thing the main thing.
No, I really, I just think that Virginia, West Virginia, you know, anything that's like in that close of proximity to the Washington D.C. swamp, as they call it, I think it's just bound to just take forever to get their shit in line and to make an actual industry there. I think it's just going to be, you know, I think it's just going to be the same stuff going on. I don't see a big change happening for Virginia until this country kind of gets it together, and then maybe there's a glimmer of hope for Virginia. You know, this is just more of the same. Glenn Youngkin is worthless. So, you know.
The country ain't gonna get back.
I think it's worse than worthless, because one of these sort of golden rules in American government is this separation between church and state. And that's pretty important to most Americans, even Americans who have a deep faith that is rooted in something outside of themselves and where they've gone to some sort of house of religious worship and gotten spiritually educated. And this line between church and state, it tends to be really, really important. I'd say it's almost foundational to this form of government that we both love to celebrate and criticize here on the show. And what's really challenging is that Martin Brown, you know, he served as as a commissioner of the Department of Social Services, and he was appointed by this governor. And what he said when he said that DEI is dead is he said that, quote, "Take a moment right now to kill that cow. DEI is dead." Brown said, "We're not going to bring that cow up anymore." He's definitely bovine shaming, but that's a whole nother story. He says it was mandated by the General Assembly, but this governor has a different philosophy of civil discourse, civility, living the golden rule, right? And so that golden rule is a precept in the Gospel of Matthew 7-12. So if you're going to be bringing in biblical quotes while you're talking about public policy in a country that was founded on the notion of a separation between church and state, that's very challenging. But what's extra challenging is that the golden rule is a moral by which says you treat others how you would want to be treated. And this moral is in various forms, has been used as a basis for society, many cultures and civilizations. And it's called the golden rule because it's basically this value in having the kind of respect and caring attitude that you would have for somebody else. And so if you're going to be in public policy, if you're going to be an elected official or appointed official, you're going to be in government, to not have that separation between church and state is a big no-no. But then to quote the Bible and to talk about the golden rule about treating other people as you would want to be treated yourself in a state and in a region of this country that doesn't have a perfect track record on this, right? That has a history that is not inconsequential in this conversation about how other people deserve to be treated. It's troubling on a lot of different levels. It presupposes that we all come from the same faith and the same book, but it also takes those thoughts, those ideals that were expressed in this religious book, and doesn't adequately apply them to this situation. And so that for all of those reasons, this gives me a lot of heartburn.
I just think Glenn Youngkin needs to go meet the sisters of the cloth, the nuns of the valley, making
the perpetual sisterhood thing
in God's name.
All these religious antics of people that want to bring religion in regards with the cannabis debate. They need to go back to the first book, Genesis, where it clearly states that God made all plants of this earth and they're all to be used and consumed. And that just needs to start that conversation there. We need to get back to in touch with some little bit of reality before we want to start putting all this different jargon and whatnot in places when it comes to
religion. Isn't reality, though. It's subjective belief.
Religion is reality, bro, because perception is reality.
Subjective belief.
Jason coming with the bomb, dropping the bomb.
The GOP keeps mixing the religion into the laws. I mean,
I'm with Jason on this one. Like, if you think back to Waco, I think is a really good example. Their reality wasn't real for anybody else but them. And they deeply believed, based on their scripture, that what was going to happen the way it was, and that they were being persecuted according to their scripture. And that lived out according to their reality, right? Like, and how much of that was real and instigated. I think that's like kind of the perfect example of how religion actually, whether we think it is subjective, but it does become reality because that's how people act and it's the world frame that they believe in. So it's like you have to tango with that and get on that level to interrogate it. Otherwise, you're going to miss them. And I think Waco's a really good example of that personally, and it applies.
I mean, I think Waco's a very extreme kind of like.
I don't think so.
Here, I think this is definitely that's a little far out there. But I mean, what it is like,
oh boy,
you have religious groups, you have Christian religious groups like these ladies, like the nuns.
They're not Christians; those are Catholics, bro. Nuns are Catholic.
Whatever,
get your religions correct, bro. If you're gonna talk about religion, you got to get it correct.
You're splitting hairs, bro. You're splitting hairs. Same thing.
What are you talking about?
No, it's not, bro.
Catholicism is Christian.
Example, but I mean it to show an example of how you misunderstanding other people and how those things that could have been easily solved through some understanding and getting on their world level and getting on their view, a lot could have been avoided. And I think that's the point of that.
I think it's safe to say that those people don't have an actual.
Whoa, where'd you go, Simon? Simon, you there, Simon?
That a little bit, they could have a better understanding of how other cultures have used cannabis and natural medicine for years.
No doubt.
Do you have any comments on this list?
I am surprised they're talking about equity and cannabis in Virginia.
Look at that! Look at the glimmer of hope. Yeah.
That's fired.
Right. I had to read it.
Yeah. Shout out Elise coming through in the clutch. That's right. It's least on the. It's least. Yeah, and they're not calling it communist equity or anything like that. You guys. I mean, come on.
The communist commonwealth, huh?
Exactly.